Welcome. I am Tom Wenzel from the Technical University of Munich. I am presenting our research on smart home devices conducted with my fellow student Patrick Bombeck and our advisors Jens Großklags from the Technical University of Munich and Samir Patel from the University of Utah. Recent years have seen a proliferation of smart home devices with everyday household objects and appliances such as TVs, light bulbs, doorbells, coffee makers, etc., getting augmented with internet connectivity and interactive capabilities. A network of such devices creates what is commonly known as the Internet of Things or IoT. For the purposes of our study, we define a smart home device as a hardware-software combination deployed within a home to perform one or more of a broad range of domestic functions. As such, smart home devices may combine and automate routine domestic tasks to increase the quality, safety, and efficiency of domestic life. Smart home devices are, by definition, embedded within a home, the most intimate and personal of settings. Therefore, the benefits and convenience they provide must be balanced with considerations of privacy and security, from the user as well as regulatory point of view. Data protection regulations as well as user privacy expectations differ across regions, yet existing studies of these issues have typically involved samples from a single region, often with a focus on a single device, such as a smart speaker. Our research attempts to fill this gap with a multi-region investigation of the perceptions and use of smart home devices in general. Specifically, we examined 3 research questions. The first research question focused on the relationships between perceptions and use of smart home devices with perceived regulatory protection, which we measured using 3 Likert type items covering protection from unwanted third-party data access, sharing, and processing. We hypothesized that higher perceived regulatory protection would alleviate concerns and raise comfort, so it would be positively associated with positive perceptions, adoption, as well as use. Our second research question examined whether variations in user expectations and practices, as well as the regulatory environment across regions, can influence the perceptions and use of smart home devices. We hypothesized that regional variations will lead to differences in perceptions, adoption, and use of smart home devices across regions. Our third research question was aimed at examining how perceptions and use of smart home devices might be affected by various characteristics of the home itself. In particular, we looked at the influence of whether the user owns or rents the home, the number of people that live in the home, and the number of children present in the home. We hypothesized that owning a home and having more people living in the home will be associated with higher positive perceptions, greater adoption, and more use of smart home devices. In contrast, we conjectured that the presence of children is likely to be associated negatively with these aspects. We operationalized the measures for the independent and dependent variables connected to our research questions and associated hypothesis in the form of an online questionnaire. Those who consented to answer the questionnaire after reading information about the study first indicated which smart home devices they owned from a list of 20 most popular smart home devices. Next, we asked questions about the purchase and use of 3 specific devices chosen at random. After that, participants provided responses regarding general attitudes and preferences regarding smart home devices and perceptions of regulatory protection for the data connected to these devices. To gather measures of baseline privacy and security preferences and practices, we included 2 standard scales from the literature: the Security Behavior Intention Scale, that is CBIS, and the Mobile Users Internet Privacy Concern Scale, that is MUIPC. At the end, we collected standard demographics along with household characteristics. We used the prolific crowdwork platform to advertise the questionnaire to those based in the United States, United Kingdom, or in the German-speaking countries in Europe, that is Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. After applying data integrity checks, the valid responses are roughly evenly distributed across these regions, with 143 responses from the United States, 155 from the United Kingdom, and 133 from the German-speaking, that is, GS region. Overall, 233 participants identified as female, 195 as male, and 3 as non-binary. Upon examining the data, we found that many of the devices were owned by too few of the participants to provide sufficient statistical power to examine their use. We therefore restricted our analysis for the use variable to the 3 devices reported to be owned by a large number of participants, with 231 reporting that they owned a smart TV, 140 owning a smart speaker, and 92 mentioned that they own a smart light bulb. The subsample of the 329 participants who owned at least one of these 3 devices provided sufficient statistical power to examine use. We used the full set of 431 responses for all other analyses. In this presentation, we provide the major high-level insight based on the statistically significant results from the analyses. Please consult the paper for the detail regarding these analyses and the corresponding statistical tests. When examining associations with perceived regulatory protection, we found that higher perceived protection was associated with positive perceptions. However, the strength of the association can vary across devices based on variations in perceived privacy risk. In addition, we found that greater perceived intrusion, as measured by MUIPC, is associated with users ascribing greater responsibility to manufacturers for providing private and secure device operation. In line with our hypothesis, we found perceived regulatory protection to be associated positively with adoption of smart home devices as well. The association is present for regulatory protection overall, but not when separately examining the items for third-party data access, sharing, and processing. The results suggest that the various aspects of data handling covered by regulatory protection can create a cumulative influence stronger than that for each of the aspects considered separately. We found a similar positive relationship between perceived regulatory protection and use of smart home devices, but only for some devices. Interestingly, the results suggest that the relationship might be present for devices that provide more complex functionality and interactive capabilities, such as smart TVs, but not for single-function ones, such as smart light bulbs. Taken together, these results provide general support of the hypotheses related to the first research question. Next, we split the data by region and compared the samples from the 3 regions we covered in the research. We found that perceptions, adoption, and use differed across the 3 regions as we hypothesized. When examined in depth, we found regional differences in expected privacy risks, as well as benefits of the devices. We similarly found that the positive association between perceived regulatory protection and adoption holds only for the German-speaking region, but not for the United States and the United Kingdom. Their use of smart home devices, in fact, showed no statistically significant differences in general across the 3 regions. The difference in use we observed can be attributed to the sole exception of the smart TV, which was reported to be used less in the German-speaking region. At a high level, we found that perceptions, adoption, and use of smart home devices differ between the German-speaking and the English-speaking regions in our study, with the United States and the United Kingdom typically exhibiting no statistically significant differences. When analyzing the influence of characteristics of the home, we found that home ownership is associated with greater adoption of smart home devices. We similarly found a positive relationship between number of people in the household and adoption. These results are in line with our hypotheses, but only for adoption, as we found no statistically significant relationships between home ownership and size and perceptions in use. Contrary to our hypotheses, we found that the presence of children in the household was associated with greater adoption as well as greater use. Specifically, we found that parents reported greater use of smart TVs and showed a greater preference for voice-based interaction with smart home devices via smart speakers or voice assistants. We wish to thank the study participants for their time and effort in responding to the study. We are also grateful for funding from the Bavarian Research Institute for Digital Transformation and the Bavarian State Ministry for Science and Arts. In summary, in our investigation of the perceptions and use of smart home devices covering the United States, United Kingdom, and the German-speaking region in Europe, we found positive associations with perceived regulatory protection for the data connected to these devices. However, perceptions and use differ across regions. Home ownership, household size, and presence of children influence adoption, but not the perceptions and use of smart home devices. These findings can be applied for devising various enhancements in the design of smart home devices, as well as public policy measures to bring the data handling of smart home devices in better alignment with user expectations regarding privacy and security. For further detail, we encourage you to read the paper available at the URL provided on the slide, or to reach out to any of the authors via email.